capital S science is about technique.
So,
More than ever, we live in a world that is controlled by science, by capital S science. Because how could small s science control anything? But capital S science is about technique. The technique of organization, the technique of management, the technique of control, including controlling people. Scientists are no longer researchers. They have not been for generations. Scientists are technicians, and we are often the ones they work upon. So why does it matter that scientists are technicians? Well, once upon a time in olden days, science used to be about research, right? In often an abstract sense. Now, there was a relationship between research, pure science, and technique, and one often had to wait for the other. And as things accelerated, it turned out that science had to wait more often for technique, right? So advancements could not be made until the way to produce a certain product or to see a certain thing had been developed. As both knowledge and technique increased, and as knowledge became more dependent on technique, you ended up with science being the product of vast teams, right? Where have all the famous scientists gone, right? There's a reason they're all gone. There's a reason there's no more Pasteur or Edison or Einstein, all very different men working in very different fields. The reason for that is that the team has become dominant, right? People can't do research without vast laboratories and teams. That produces people who just know how to exercise techniques. That's it. They're not searching for knowledge's sake. They're not actually doing science. Okay, and this is why people can talk about science with a capital S, like follow the science. Follow the science. What can that even possibly mean? That only works when you're thinking of it as religion, connecting it to magic. Magic is also technique. There's a reason that so-called science, capital S science today, is so narrow-minded, and the followers of this technical religion are so narrow-minded. Once science shifted from research to technique, right, to be dominated by technique, what you end up with is 100% problem solving, right? So an example that Jacques Ellul cites, which I think another thinker had talked about, in the Technological Society is, well, you have a worker and the worker is tired. Now, if you can figure out techniques to quantify how tired he is, you can then name the problem and solve the problem, right? What that produces, and in order to do this, you need to be able to narrow your field of vision, right? So when you're defining and problem solving, it's actually useful to ignore, for example, maybe some social aspects of a worker's life. What is the family like, right? What pressure does an industrial society place on family? How does that affect how tired the worker is? What about his religious life? What about, you just keep asking questions. You can even ask specific technical questions, like what about nutrition? Maybe what you focus on is body temperature, right? We notice that when he is tired, he overheats. And so how can we just focus on that problem? And you can have a real effect on his weariness by narrowing your field of vision and not considering all these other holistic things. There's nothing wrong with that process per se. But it produces a class of people who consciously put blinders on. And their children, their intellectual offspring, are unaware that the blinders are on at all. Which means that we have allowed ourselves to be ruled by a class of bureaucrats and technicians who have blinders on, who have very narrow views of the world. And when now look at our Western world. So it's significant that scientists are no longer researchers, that they are technicians, because they give answers that are narrow-minded. And although they're unaware of it now, the very process of what they do narrowed their field of vision to where it is now. In the beginning, that was harmless. Or I should say, it is an innocuous part of a process of problem solving that has now completely shaped their world. And our society has become so thoroughly technical that the world is a bureaucratic office, and the techniques of management are how decisions are made. If we wish to preserve the human soul, we must preserve wholeness, and we cannot make decisions or allow others to make decisions for us that are based on narrowness. For example, the narrownesses that create all of these crises after the pandemic, right? Why do suicide rates skyrocket? Because the scientists are only considering the problem of how to minimize infections. We have the responsibility as Christians to help people consider their whole lives. The peace of Christ be upon you.
Aí sim é um homem de verdade, não é esses troços do grupo não, essas carcaças velhas, uó, fim de carreira.
Cadê você, profeta, autarquia? Hein? Pedrada no inferno, fala comigo aí, matador de demônio. Hein?